Do you have to be a great teacher to be a great administrator? In full disclosure, I don't think so. And I'm not saying that teaching isn't important. I'm not saying that you shouldn't understand teaching if you are an administrator. But I always think about coaching and I think about sports, my love of them. Some of the best coaches to ever play whatever sport were actually not that great of players. And some of the worst coaches were actually amazing players. Sometimes they don't really connect. And so there's different skills. And I'll be honest with you, if I was to say a comparison of how I was as an administrator versus a teacher, I was a way better administrator than I was as a teacher. And I thought I was a pretty good teacher, but administration just kind of really connected with me. But what is imperative is not necessarily that you were a great teacher if you're being an administrator, but you care for teachers, you care for staff, that you want them to be successful and you put them in a situation where they succeed, and benefit from the work that I actually do. Not that they benefit because of what you do, but that the things that you do put them in a position where they're successful. I thought about this after my conversation with Dr. Margaret Coates. She is actually superintendent of Wausau Public Schools in Oklahoma, and I was there, and I could feel a real genuine care and love for her when I was there, and it was kind of a little bit shocking. I kind of bring it up a few times in the podcast, but as I talked to her, one of the things I really realized, and I don't know how she was as a teacher, I'm sure she was absolutely amazing, but what I could feel from her was she had a really genuine care for the well-being of staff. And we often talk about let's do what's best for kids. And 100% do I agree with that. But the way you do what's best for kids is you put people that serve them, that are closest to them in situations where they're successful. And she often talks about the importance of high expectations. It's not that you don't have that, but you have those high expectations not only of your staff, but of yourself, but you help them and support them in that journey to meet those expectations through that process. And that really comes from a care. So do you have to be a great teacher to be a great administrator? Not necessarily, but you do want to have to see your teachers be great. I think that is really crucial. And I thought about that the whole time I was talking to Margaret. Really great podcast. I know you're going to love it. Welcome back to another episode of the Innovator's Mindset podcast. Hey everyone, this is George Couros. Welcome back to another episode of the Innovator's Mindset podcast. I am so blessed to have Dr. Margaret Coates. She is the superintendent of Wausau Public Schools in Oklahoma. I was able to speak to the group. I think it was last summer. They were absolutely amazing. You were amazing. The mutual love you had for each other was really, really incredible. So I've been talking to some of your leadership team, connected with you, and I was like, you know what, I didn't have a chance to kind of like talk to Margaret enough on that day. So I thought, hey, I'm going to invite her on the podcast. So Margaret, if you could just tell everyone a little bit about who you are, what you do today, how you got there, I think it's a really great place to start.
Sure. Yeah. Margaret Coates. And I started in a small town, really a small town school experience in Oklahoma, and actually went to private school for a few years after my fourth grade year. And then fifth grade, moved to this small town, had a great experience in rural Oklahoma, loved it, graduated, and went on to college at the University of Tulsa and played basketball there at the University of Tulsa, and stayed and got my master's degree. And then from there, worked at Phillips Petroleum Company in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, in a corporate fitness department there, and great experience. Loved that time, and got married and had kids and became a stay-at-home mom for 5 years. But I can't sit still. Like to keep my brain active, and so while I was a stay-at-home mom, I did personal training, and then I went back to school and got a degree in information technology. And while I was getting this IT degree, I took math classes and was like, oh my gosh, I like math, or I can do math now. And I didn't really have an interest in it when I was in high school, but discovered that I love the challenge, the problem solving. It's like a puzzle, and really love the challenge of math. And I was already certified as a teacher, so I thought I'll just see if I can take the certification test, and I passed for math, and began subbing here in Owasso as a math teacher, and then got hired as a geometry teacher for 9th and 10th graders, and was a teacher for 5 years, then became assistant principal for 5 years, then left and became principal at a middle school in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, and then opened the freshman academy there in Broken Arrow with 1,400 ninth graders in one building. And so that was quite an experience to have those ninth graders. Any of you that taught ninth graders, you know what I'm talking about there. And had to round them up, but I loved it. I love kids. I love teaching. I love school. I had a great school experience. And so I really want to make sure that everyone that I'm connected with has the same great experience with school, or that's my goal. And from there, as a freshman academy principal, became assistant superintendent in Broken Arrow, and then had the opportunity to come back to Owasso and did so as assistant superintendent, and then retired actually for 7 months, retired because I had this, and I thought I was going to be done for good, because I wanted to go do some big things physically and challenge myself. And so I hiked the Pacific Crest Trail from Mexico to Canada in 2021. And when I got back from hiking, some things that had transitioned here in Owasso, and got a call and said, "Hey, would you come back and want to maybe be interim superintendent?" And so I said, okay, came back, and I thought that would be a good way to see, like, hey, do I really like being a superintendent or not? And I became one and absolutely loved it. And I still love it. And it's this challenge. No 2 days are the same. And now I'm starting my third year as superintendent here in Owasso. So that's my journey.
I forgot you told me you retired. I forgot about that. I
Yeah.
remember that too. I didn't know this about your past experience working in the corporate world. And I always find that really fascinating, because there's obviously lessons that you can take from there that apply to things that you do in education. One of the things that I think I wish more people would pay attention to is, I think the corporate world can learn a lot from educators, because you got to constantly develop, you got to constantly grow, learn, no matter what field. And I think there's no one that does that better than, education. What are some of the things that you kind of took away from that experience that you brought into education? Is there anything that you saw as a benefit, or was it anything that you're like, nah, I don't want to do that? Like, what was some of the lessons you learned from that process?
Well, one of the things that in the corporate world, where I was with Phillips Petroleum Company, it was in Bartlesville, that they had a real family culture atmosphere. So taking care of the whole family, not just the employee, but making sure, like, for example, in the summertime, wellness, when I say whole employee, so they had a corporate fitness department. So they're focused on wellness for employees, because they want them to feel healthy and well, and come to work. But they also did things with spouses. In the summertime, we offered swimming lessons for kids. So there was just this whole family approach, which was probably unique maybe to Phillips Petroleum Company. But the other thing, so that kind of that to me is similar. Phillips is similar in that whole family approach to school, because I feel like school is a whole family. We invite spouses in, your kids come to the same school that you teach at, or have that opportunity a lot of times for your own kids to be in your same school. And then you in the community, you're going to the same events, and you see your teachers, you see community members, and as your kids are participating in things. But the other thing was Phillips Petroleum at that time, and they probably still do, they're ConocoPhillips now, but had great professional development. So really focused on PD, technology. Like, that's where I learned about Microsoft Word, and that's when email first came out, and learned how to do, email, and this technology, which now it's like we couldn't live without it. But so when I became a teacher, we were a little bit behind in that aspect of solid PD and professional development, or at least here, knowing how important and critical that is for ongoing learning for teachers, to keep us inspired and keep us motivated and keep that energy going. And so that is something that I still am a big proponent of professional development, and want to make sure that we're constantly allowing those opportunities, having a high expectations for certain things, but then providing those resources and
Right.
opportunities for that professional growth to get there and that professional learning. And just technology too, like we got to keep up with it and make sure that we are, and I'm not saying technology and like we have to have all the latest trends, but
Right.
if we are going to invest in something, we need to make sure it works really well, and then have the collaboration behind deciding and vetting what technology or instructional apps and things that we're going to use. But anyway, the importance of professional development and then kind of that whole family culture is what I took from Phillips.
And even before we got on the podcast, because I remember when we first just kind of connected when I was there, you talked about you're a runner. I was actually asking you for advice on my injuries I keep dealing with.
Yeah.
There too. And so I know that you have a focus on your own, health and wellness. Obviously, it took a year off to like do physical adventures. It's like maybe
Yes.
like American Gladiator will be back on. You'll be there one day.
Yeah, it's
Right?
like if I could do it, I would. Yeah, I'm one of those people. Like I love the risk taking
Yeah,
or adventurous. I say risk taking, but and it is risk taking, but
yeah,
it's measured risk. I'm not going to do anything that's going to
right.
really, really,
Have to cut
really
off your
put
arm
myself
in the
in.
mountains or anything like that.
Yeah, but I I really want educators to feel like it's
Right,
okay to try new things. It is okay to try. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? You
right.
may have to do the lesson again. Like it's okay to try new technology. It is okay. Like, let's take that risk, put ourselves out there, go for it, and great things can happen
Yeah, and if you
from that.
model that, if you model that in your position, it's more likely to embrace it, right? Like it's easy for people, and this is something that I've always shared, is that when superintendents say, "Hey, you should take risks," and then they don't see people doing it, and it's like, well, it's easy for you to say because you can fire me if something goes wrong, right? So I need to see that
Yeah.
person who's
Yeah.
encouraging that. One of the things that you seem pretty passionate about, you talked about this idea of wellness. This is a huge conversation in education right now. People are just exhausted, especially over the last few years, and really kind of feeling like education is almost depleting them, and making them maybe, mental struggles, physical struggles. I think those are interconnected. What do you do as a superintendent? Like, what are some of the things that you're doing to help your staff make sure that they take care of themselves first before they can, be their best for, the people they serve?
Yeah. Well, we just try to encourage them to number one, if you're sick, don't come to work if you're sick.
Right.
It's okay to stay home. That's why you have your sick days.
Yeah.
Use those sick days, but also it's okay to disconnect. You don't have to answer emails after work hours like that. Set the expectations. What we try to do is just set expectations for appropriate boundaries, because I think some think, well, if this parent emails or a student emails, I got to respond, right away. As long as you respond, in an appropriate amount of time, you don't have to do it on your own
Right.
outside of work time,
Right.
like at home with your family time. So setting those appropriate boundaries. We also, with our HR department, we just had a total wellness come in where that we provide benefits where they can come in and for free get like their blood, just kind of a wellness check and get all their different, all their, there's a whole list of things, wellness components that they can get measured and checked and make sure that they're doing okay. And if they're, get results, they can come during the workday. It's okay to take off from your class. We'll make sure you have coverage to come to this wellness event and get yourself checked out. And we offer employee assistance program, counseling and things like that too, which probably a lot of other school districts probably offer that as well. But really try to also just model having fun. Let's have fun when we come to work. Let's make it fun. It's okay to have fun. And do things like I've got a team that we're putting together to run the Route 66 marathon. And so we're doing the relay. We're doing the relay and we've got a team together. And so trying to just model like, let's have fun. Let's do some things that are physical and we also, after in January, we use Google Classroom. And then in January, after the new year,
Mhm.
we have little tidbits that will go out on Google Classroom about wellness tips and things like that. So not a whole lot, but those are the things that we're doing right now.
It seems like a lot more than some. So I appreciate that. Once I get some dry needling done, as you suggested, then maybe I'll
Yes.
join your marathon team. But
Yes.
not
Come run the relay.
not until then. When we were talking before, and I think I made this comment earlier. You could tell there's a really sincere appreciation for you as superintendent, and I believe that's because you evoke this sincere appreciation for your staff, and specifically, I would say teachers. Like, you are a huge advocate of teachers. You want them to love the profession. You even told me, your own son is in his first year of teaching. What are maybe some of the ways you do that, to really, kind of, I don't know, promote the profession, get people excited about it, because it's hard right now. Like, a lot of people don't want to teach. Like, I do this quite a bit, and it's kind of funny because people don't say this when I talk. I'm like, how many of you thought about quitting this year? And like, people don't ask that question. And it's like a ton of hands go up. They're like, ah, and like, so even just acknowledging it, but really you trying to help people find that spark in themselves, but really make sure they feel appreciated. Because I think that is a huge issue in education, is that we always say we appreciate teachers so much, but when it comes down to it, they don't feel appreciated. So what are some of those ways that you maybe show that appreciation from your role, and not maybe just even for your school district, but for the just the profession in general?
Well, as far as the profession and public schools and teachers, number one, I have a great working relationship with our legislators that represent Owasso, and so I am advocating for public schools with our legislators, and also trying to provide information to our teachers about what's going on legislatively, things that will impact them. That's like, I want you to know, basically, like, we're fighting this fight, and here's what's going on, and we're going to make sure that we get funding for schools, funding for teachers, funding whatever it is,
Yeah.
the legally, that could impact them, so they know that, like, I've got their backs when it comes to legislation, and that I'm there supporting them at that policy level. And that's very, high level, but also trying to educate them so that they can also be advocates and for themselves, and go speak to legislators too, because that's important that their voice is heard. They're down in the trenches doing the hard work every day, and so our legislators need to hear from them. But then I think it's important that they get, kind of public pats on the back, and that they're recognized for the hard work that they do. So I started this a couple of years ago. I call it FaceTime Fridays, and I go and just have FaceTime literally with a teacher and their class. And I'll do a morning and maybe an afternoon, do a couple of schools, and go into maybe 2 or 3 classes within their schools. And I'll just, whatever they're doing, I'm going to do the activity too. So if it's a pre-K class and they're sitting on the floor, then I'm sitting on the floor with the pre-K students, and the teacher's teaching. I'm like, just do your thing, and I'm going to join in. And then I've got our director of communications there, and our video person there, and we're taking pictures, and then we'll post that and celebrate the teacher and the students, and we'll post that on social media. So I want people to see, like, oh, here's the amazing things that's going on in our classrooms. And this went on today, this Friday, this FaceTime Friday. This is what happened today in this class with this teacher. And so that has been really fun to be able to highlight teachers and what they do, and kids. And just yesterday, we did another thing yesterday that were the day in the life of a band instructor. And so I followed one of our band directors, and she teaches at the 6th grade center, 7th grade center, 8th grade center, and then she has band rehearsal with the high school band after school. So I followed her, and we did the same sort of thing, video, but I used to play the flute when I was in school. And so she gave me a flute, and I sat by this student in 6th grade during the 6th grade class. And it was so much fun because the student was teaching me, like reteaching me how to play. And the student was saying things like, girl power, you got this kind of thing, and just encouraging me. And the teacher was just, teaching, and we said we're videoing that. And then we just went to each class and participated with what was going on, but also just at the same time, we're giving an inside peek into what's happening in the classroom, but also really recognizing the good work of the teachers that's happening. And so that's what we did yesterday. And that video hopefully we'll post, I don't know, maybe next week or the week after. We call that Minutes with Margaret. And so the videos are Minutes with Margaret, and then the FaceTime Fridays are just still pictures. But those are two things that may seem self-serving maybe on my part because I'm in them, but it's really me trying to say to teachers and our parents, like, look at how amazing our school is and our teachers are, and look at the great things they're doing with our kids. So those are just a couple of things.
So I made this as a joke, and it was like, there's truth in it. I talked about, like, I felt your staff really liked you, and I was kind of thrown off by it when I remember that very distinctly. And like, I don't know, I never know the reasoning, and I guarantee you this, and I'm not saying this is an insult to you at all. It's just reality. I'm sure someone doesn't like you in your district. I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure. It's a fact.
Reality. It's just reality. It's just reality. That's how it is, right? But what I've found, like, listening to you, is that you can feel you have such a genuine love of teaching and teachers, which I think really, we always talk about, like, hey, let's do what's best for kids, but you really want to do what's best for kids. You got to do what's best for the people that serve them. And you can feel that. And that's probably why they like you. That's my guess. It's just my guess, right? So I really appreciate that. I'm so glad we got to sit down. I feel like I used some of my time with you to get some running coaching. So maybe a little self-serving on my own end here too.
That's okay. That's okay.
I just wanted to say thanks for all you do for education, and thanks for having me join you all, because I just getting to see some of those interactions that you have with your staff and how wonderful your staff is and how great they are for the community. It really meant a lot to me, and I just love seeing that. So even like over a year later, I still remember you all very fondly. So.
Well, we remember you too. You got us so motivated and so inspired to start the school year. And people still talk about how George Couros, when are we going to get him back? He was our favorite speaker. So
there we go.
Have you come back?
Okay. Well, there you go. Now I'm just going to cut that part out. That's the only part I'm going to keep on the podcast. Anyways, Margaret, thanks so much for your time. Thank you everyone for listening. Please connect with Margaret. You'll see all the socials below, but make sure you check out her district as well. They're absolutely amazing. Thanks everyone for listening. Take care.